During this fourth video about Adobe Experience Design, we are going to deepen the artboards, their functions, and how to use them. In fact, when we are into the design area of Adobe XD, we use the artboards kinda like our storyboards. In fact, we put into them all of our graphic elements of our projects. Also, in this video, we are going to talk about how to use the grids and the guides, so the layout in the square grids and the guides onto the artboards. In fact, they are also very important into the design process because they give us a structure even before we start to design a project. So, we are now going to create an artboard. So we can come closer to this artboard and we can click on this icon, or we can also click onto our keyboard to the letter A, which is the shortcut to the artboard. And we can create our artboard by clicking on the work area, and we can use these smart guides to align our artboard with the one that's below us and the one that's on our right side. So we have already seen that we can change the dimensions of our artboard, and we are going to repeat how we can do this. Of course, you can do this from the welcome screen. You can choose if you want to have an artboard with predefined sizes or an artboard with custom sizes. Also, when you are into the design area of Adobe XD, you can change the artboard's dimensions by the transform option. So you can change the width and height, and you can also lock the width and height. And by doing this, when you change the dimensions of the artboards in this way, you will maintain the same proportions. To maintain the same proportions, you can also click on your keyboard on the Shift, and in fact, you maintain the same proportions. Also, if you want to maintain the same proportions and move the artboard and change its dimensions by the center of the artboard, you can click on your keyboard on Shift and Alt, and you can move the artboard, and as you can see, it's changing its dimensions from the center of it. So, what we are going to do now is to change our artboard and make it the same dimensions of the artboard on our right side. So we can click on this artboard and we can see the width and height of it. So 414 for the width and 896 for the height. So we can click on our artboard and we can change its dimensions. So let's check if they are the same dimensions. And now we are going to align this artboard by using these smart guides with the artboard on our right side and the artboard below us. Now we can move this hatch lower and we can change the name of our artboard. As we did in the first video, we can click one time on the name of our artboard, and in this way we will select the artboard. But if we click 2 times on the name, we can erase this name and rename it as we want. So, of course, when you create an artboard, you will see it on the layers, and you can click from the layer to select the artboard, and if we click 2 times onto this icon, we will come closer to our artboard. So, what we are going to do now is to see what we can do when we click with the right side of our mouse onto the artboard. So, we can select our artboard from its name by clicking one time or by clicking one time on the name of the layer here on the left side, and we can click now with the right side of our mouse and see what options we have. Of course, we can cut the artboard, we can copy it, we can copy the SVG code, we can delete it, we can add the color of our artboard to the assets, we can mark it for export, we can bring it to the front, bring it forward, send it backward, and send it back. Also, we can align to the pixel grid. So, before we start to talk about the grids and the guides, I wanted to talk about the X and Y positions in the space of our work area. In fact, as we said in the first video, we can see on the right side of the work area the width and height of our artboard, but also its position in space. In fact, we are in a 2D workspace, and our workspace is located on Cartesian axis. So the X position and the Y position indicates to us how far from the origin of the axis is our artboard. Of course, this distance is measured in pixels. If we put the number 0 on the X and Y position, we will find the origin of our Cartesian axis. And as we move our artboard, we can see the numbers changing. If I move my artboard in an horizontal way from left to right, it will change its dimensions, its distance in a positive way. But if I move my artboard from right to left and I go over the origin point, origin X point of my workspace, of my Cartesian axis, it will change in a negative way. The same thing works for the Y position. In fact, if I move it from lower to high, I can see the position changing in a negative way, because when I go over the 0 point, it will change in a negative way if I go from down to up, and the same will happen in a positive way if I go from up to down. So we can reposition our artboard, and now we will take some assets from a file that we downloaded in the previous video. In fact, if you click on File and we click on Open Recent, you can open your files. I will take an asset from the wireframe mobile file, which is a UI kit that we downloaded in the previous video. So I can zoom and I can take, for example, this asset. So I will click on it, and then with my keyboard I will click on Ctrl C, and then I will go back to my file, select my artboard and click on Ctrl V. So I copied and pasted my asset. So what we are going to do now is to do a vertical scrolling. Also, the element that I took, the asset that I took from the other file, is a repeatable element. This means that if I click onto this handle on the sides, I can make these elements repeat themselves in a vertical but also in an horizontal way. So we are going to click on our artboard and make it bigger in a vertical way so we can see how the scrolling works. So we see that we have gone over the hatch, so these elements cannot be seen without a scrolling. So we click on the artboard and then we click on play, and as you see on the preview, I have to do a scrolling to see the elements below the hatch. If you click on scrolling none and you go to the preview, you will see this preview, which is kind of like a fake preview, because from our screen we will not see this, but what we saw on the preview that we saw before. So what we are going to do now is delete this repeatable element by clicking on it and then clicking on our keyboard to Ctrl X, because now we are going to use and to talk about the guides and the grids. If you already use other Adobe's programs, you will know that the guides are in every Adobe program, and also if you use Adobe InDesign, you will know how important the grids and the guides are for our design process. In fact, with the grids and the guides, we can create a previous structure and we can put our graphic elements onto our grid. So when we create, for example, a layout grid, we have some support points and we can lean on these points. We can lean on the guides that we create. So first of all, we are going to activate the guides. So we already seen that they are already open, but if you click on hide the guides, you will close them. So we have our guides activated, and to see them, you will have to go on the edges of your artboard. In fact, as you can see, by going onto the edge, we can click and keep our finger on the mouse and it will appear this guide. And you can position them whatever you want. So, by creating this sort of grid, you have some support points. In fact, if you take, for example, this element from this artboard, you can move it and you can position it onto these grids, onto these guides. As you can see, we can go a little closer. As you can see, it is positioned on the guides. It is leaning on the guides. Of course, you can click on View and then Guides and then Idle Guides to hide them, or you can show them and then erase them by clicking on them, keeping your finger on the mouse and going onto the edges of the artboard to erase them. So now let's see how we can use the grids, so the layout grids and the square grids. Of course, we can open them from Window, from View, and you can select to show layout grid or show square grid. So with these grids, you can take, for example, this picture, press the Ctrl C and then Ctrl V, and you can position your, in this case, raster image onto these squares that you have here. Of course, you can change the dimensions of these squares. So you can click on the artboard, you can go to grid, and you can see here square size, which is now 8. If you select for your square size the number 1, it will mean that every square is a pixel, so it has the same dimensions of a pixel. And you can position and make your elements lean onto these guides. Of course, you can also change the colors of your grids and of your guides from here. And then we are going to use the layout grid. So you can click on view and show layout grid, or you could do it from here. And we can see that we have 4 columns on our artboard. We can choose to have 2 columns or 3 columns or as much columns we want. We can choose the gutter width between them. Of course, it will influence the column width. And if we change the column width, we will change also the gutter width. You can also choose to have different dimensions and change all of the dimensions by ourselves. So we can create our own layout grid, and we can use this layout grid to position our images and elements. So, of course, you can change the color of your layout grid, as you can do also with the square grid. So you can click on here and change the color and the opacity of the grid. Also, if you want to save a grid as default to use it for other artboards or other projects, you can do it. So you can click on Make Default, and if you go onto another artboard, you click on it and you click on Use Default, you are now using on this artboard the same grid. Of course, it will resize because this artboard is different, as different sizes from our artboard. So that's all for this video. Thank you for watching this tutorial about Adobe Experience Design. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments. I invite you to see the other videos of this channel. Thank you again, and we will see each other on the next video about Adobe Experience Design.